Hi, everybody. I'm Lila, and today I'm alone because all of my friends hate me. You know what I don't hate, and all of my friends don't understand or find it nearly as interesting as I do. I really have a problem. Is religions. You ask pretty much any of my friends, they'll say, "I don't know why she knows so much about Hinduism for someone who grew up Christian and lives in America, a very non-Hindu country." I mean, there are Hindu people, but not very many in comparison to a lot of other religions. People are laughing at me. So that's where we're gonna start. We're gonna start with Hinduism. We're gonna talk about all the important world religions. Sorry, my notes turned off. Oh, I forgot that I'm not supposed to have it right next to my mouth. Um, so here, I'll hold you here, and I hope that that wasn't too painful. All right, Hinduism. Hinduism is I don't really know what order they came in exactly, but I call it one of like the first ones that's mentioned as important. Religion in the world. Whatever. All sorts of religions came about, but this one stuck around a really, really long time. And honestly, that's kind of impressive. I don't stick around for much. I'm kind of flighty. But Hinduism really, I don't even know where it came from. That's not important. What's important is the like social system and all the other beliefs that come with it. I think I sneezed. I'm a firm believer that sneezes always come in twos, so just prepare yourself for another sneeze. Um, so the Hinduism follows this holy book called the Vedas. And there's like these big four main ideas. I don't remember what they are, but they're important. Why are you looking at me like that? Big four main ideas, like lots of other religions, you got these like things you're supposed to follow. Yada yada yada. Back to Hinduism, I'm back on track now, and I was holding that too close to my face. I apologize. Um, so there's this holy book called the Vedas where they just talk about all the religions that are important and everything that's important. Yada yada yada. But one of the big, like the main thing that you should probably know about is the Varna system, or the caste system in which they class people. So the highest class is known as the Brahmins, or the closest to Brahma, the god deity being. I don't know, he's got a lot of names and a lot of arms, I think. Um, but the Brahmins are like the rich people, like any sort of like lord or earl or just anyone who has a lot of money is considered a Brahmin. They're the closest to reaching like heaven or being done with all of their life and all of their duties. Next comes the this is a hard word. Um, kshatriyas. Kshatriyas. We're gonna go with that. And they're a little bit less money, but for the most part. Oh, I touched something. I turned up the echo for that. I apologize. I turned it back down. Um, they have a little bit like less money, a little bit lower, but they're still like important. What? Oh, I did. No, I didn't. I moved it back. I moved the volume down. Sorry if you couldn't hear me, but I'm talking loud enough. You probably should be able to, anyways. Um, and I saw this one thing where they explained it, where it's like each level like follows a little bit more. Like the top, the Brahmins are like the big leaders, and then the Kshatriyas are like they lead most of the time, but they listen to the Brahmins. And then next come the Vaishyas, where they rarely ever lead, but they do lead the people known as the Shudras, which are like the lowest class. And they don't believe that like in your lifetime you can move up and down in the caste system, but they believe that like over the courses of your lifetime, you will alter where you are and like by like doing certain deeds. For example, one person's deeds could be eat 45 grilled cheeses in an hour. I don't think it is, but it could be, and like uh, doing that deed along with a bunch of other ones. Like it's not just like, oh, one thing will make you go up to the next. It's like a bunch of things. Um, and like doing that and maybe like somehow not puking after eating 45 grilled cheeses in an hour and will combined will take you up from uh Shudra to a Vashya. But not everyone liked this system a lot because it was like poor. It's a poor stay poor, rich stay rich. I moved the volume again. It's very much like a poor stay poor, rich stay rich situation. Um, and obviously the poor people weren't very happy with that, and they suffered a lot and a lot of unhappiness. So this guy comes along, and he's rich, by the way. He's Siddhartha Gautama was like believe he was a kshatriya. I'm sorry if I'm saying that butchering that, by the way. Um, it is what it is. I don't have a linguist expert over here, and most of my friends are white. Not all of us. There's one right there. She's not white, but but she grew up in a very white area. um, where was I? Oh, and not everybody liked the caste system because they were like poor and suffering. So this guy Siddhartha Gautama comes along and he's like, I'm gonna figure out why everyone's suffering. And he goes on this whole journey. And like at the end of his journey, he sits under this fig tree for like 3 days, eating exclusively figs. And then he comes down and he's like, I know the cause of all human suffering, and I'm gonna cure all human suffering. And that's the Buddha, and this is the start of Buddhism. Um, Buddhism just completely rejects the caste system. They're like, sorry, I'm not supposed to swear anymore because it's kind of a pain to bleep, but I'm probably gonna keep swearing. um, but like he comes up with this, and he's like, all right, screw the caste system. That's causing a lot of suffering. And then he's like, and I firmly, and they once again the idea of reincarnation. Your life is born, you're born again until you reach this state. He calls it nirvana. You might know the band Nirvana. They're named after this. Um, R.I.P. Kurt Cobain. You are missed. Um, I wrote a paper about Kurt Cobain. I wrote it in my seminar essay. It's great. I did a really good job on that. And then like this is where karma Buddhism is where karma comes from as well. The idea of like good and bad karma. You do good things, you do bad things, you get all of these things in return. And he believes that like the karma you have allows you to like get closer and closer to nirvana. Then he starts spreading this religion. And Hinduism and Buddhism are two of the big religions that come out of trade. Traded a lot. It's spread a lot through trade routes. You can look at the Silk Roads, you'll see it creeps up the side of southeastern Asia. Very clearly, if you look at any sort of like Freemanpedia map, which you definitely should look at Freemanpedia, he's very smart. He knows a lot about what he's talking about. On the other side of Asia, we move into like northern Africa, really, and like Egypt, and you get Judaism, which I feel like is more commonly known as just Jewish people. You get Jewish, and it starts with this guy named Abraham who gets a message from God. Huh? Oh yeah, there's a lawnmower, and it's my father. He's loud, and I don't think he realizes just quite how loud he is. I don't either. In case you're wondering, we're a lot alike. But so Abraham gets a message from God telling him like, "Oh, you gotta save all these people. You gotta save all the other Jewish people from the Egyptians and like get everyone out of the way." And then he does, and they go and they're in like Jerusalem, and Jerusalem's right. I don't know. I'm not Jewish. They cross the Red Sea and they leave Egypt, and then they're somewhere, and then they build a settlement, and then yay, Jewish people are free from Egypt. Um, as Jewish goes on, like, they become there's, like, another type of Jewish people who are, like, they're referred to as Orthodox Jews, where they're just pretty much just stricter. They have, like, they do all these good deeds to get into heaven, and but, like, not to get into heaven. I don't know a lot about it. I'm not super educated on it. I would not consider myself any sort of expert, and if I'm wrong, please do correct me. But they're a little bit stricter about their religious practices, and you always have people that are, but there's a specific name for these people, so once again, be respectful. I don't know if I said it earlier, but always be respectful about all sorts of people. This is America, freedom of religion. You have a Second Amendment right, practice it. Another thing about Judaism, there's no sort of caste system, except God is better than everybody. Worship God, but it's pretty standard. I feel like. Oh, Abraham becomes the first prophet of the Judaistic religions. Then their holy book is referred to as the Torah, but if you look in like a modern day, if you look into the Bible, which comes after, it's the second Judaistic religion. Um, it's the Old Testament, pretty much. Just it's in Hebrew. And I don't speak Hebrew at all. We got a lot of friends that do. Got a lot of friends that speak Hebrew, and it's really cool. I thought I messed with the settings again, but I didn't. Um, and then moving forward in time, after Abraham, we get to the Roman Empire and Jewish people in the Roman Empire. So the Romans didn't like Jewish people very much because they were a polytheistic religion. I mean, they were like the Romans were technically really religiously tolerant, but they didn't like that Jewish people weren't super religiously tolerant. It's a common theme for most Judaistic religions is very little religious tolerance. Firm believers in the one true God thing. Um, and Maddie, who isn't here, was has been to Italy, and she's like, yeah, they literally just like when uh Christianity and Judaism and crap took over Rome, they kind of just put crosses on the old polytheistic temples. Yeah, that's like literally all they did. Speaking of Christianity, when the Jewish people were being persecuted by the Romans, this guy called Jesus. So Jesus um comes along and he's like, I'm the son of God and the son of man, and this is my mom and she's a virgin. That's the Virgin Mary, in case you're wondering. I can make a lot of comments about that, but I won't. I won't make the comments. If you want to hear them, ask. um, sorry. Um, yeah. Um, so Jesus comes along and he like frees all the Jewish people. He dies and comes back to life. That's why we have Easter. And his birthday is Christmas. And what else is important about him? Like Ash Wednesday, something something, Fat Tuesday. I don't know anything about that. That's Catholic. And comes Catholicism out of Christianity. But Catholicism was the first Christian religion and arguably one of the most important. Definitely one of the most important. Um, but speaking of other things that are not Catholicism but are still Christian, it comes Protestantism. It started with Martin Luther, this priest for this church who was like, the Pope's kind of being a dick. He's using a lot of our money for things he shouldn't be using all of our money for. 'Cause he got really greedy and started like the Pope of the time. I don't know his name. They're all named like Francis or something. Um, Martin Luther, not King Jr. Don't worry, guys. He also liked the Bible, but not quite the same one yet. Um, and so he's like, all right, screw you guys. I'm gonna make these 95 theses and put them on my door to my church, and say everything that's wrong with the Catholic Church at the moment because it was really corrupt. And he did, and people listened to him, and it formed Lutheranism, which was the first Protestant religion. Woo! No Pope. They're like, screw the Pope. We don't like that. We don't like. There's this one guy that makes all this money off of a church and a worship, and that he can spend the money the way he spends the money. I'm pretty sure our current pope is pretty great. I'm getting a nod. I don't follow him, but I think he's not bad. Um, and obviously, there's like other kinds of Protestant religions that have like formed out of both Lutheranism and the Catholic Church, and then out of each other. Some of them are like Angelicism, baptism. There's a non-denominational thing where it's like I'm just a Christian, which I don't really get, to be honest. How you come up with that? Um, and which is kind of important. And then from Christianity in Saudi Arabia comes Islam. Islam's really, really important because Dar al Islam, which means the House of Islam, um, like made everything. They made like everything. Astrolabe, all of the math. You can blame them for math. Don't blame current Islamic people. Blame Islamic people of that time. Don't blame people that are alive for things that happened when they weren't. Um, and Muhammad was this dude who was like kind of hating on what was going on in his city, which is called Mecca. And so he was like, "All right, guys, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna just go stand in this cave." And then in this cave, he was like, "Oh my God, God's talking to me." And he calls God Allah. That's just the other name for God. It's not a different God from Christianity, technically. It's just the name for it. And he writes this book called the Quran. And oh my hood for gangsta. Um, sorry, I gotta fix my hair. It's important. My luscious, luscious locks of hair. Um, and he writes this book called the Quran, and he like gets all these people to follow his religion. And there's a big fight about after he dies. There's a big fight about who's next in line. It's like his brother or his best friend, and this becomes a split of the Sunni and Shias, which is still a problem to this day. But in terms of world history, I would think most about the differences between the Ottoman Empire and the Safavid Empire. Um, Sunni and Shia, respectively, I believe. Double check my Google me on that one. She can't. She doesn't have access to anything to Google me. Um, and they just preach like that's the major difference. Um, is well, that's the split. The reason for the split is that there's also like the Hazaras and stuff, but I won't get into that. You don't need to know that. And that's really important because it spread along all sorts of trade routes through the Indian Ocean as well as along the Silk Roads and the Trans-Saharan trade. Speaking of Islam and the Trans-Saharan trade, the Sahara as Trans-Saharan as in across the Sahara Desert, there was this guy named Mansa Musa in the kingdom of Mali on the other side of the Sahara Desert. No one had ever been to before, and this really important guy named Ibn Battuta, Big Dog Ibn Battuta, um, traveled across the Sahara Desert with camels and brought Islam to Mansa Musa. And part of this thing of Islam is you're supposed to make pilgrimage to Mecca once in your life, at least once in your lifetime. So when Mansa Musa goes to make pilgrimage to Mecca, he's the king of Mali, by the way. So he's got lots of money. He stops in Egypt and spends a lot of money in Egypt and floods the economy of Egypt, and they're like economically destroyed for quite a while. Um, like quite a while. Let's see the next. And then other ways of trade, Hinduism and Buddhism spread along the southeastern Asia. Islam kind of spread in like a big circle here in like southwestern Asia and Africa. And then like it did get other places. It is in Indonesia, what is modern day Indonesia. It is in southeastern Asia, but primarily it spread in a big circle there. And then Hinduism and Buddhism both spread up along the southeastern Asian coast. I'm like, for you guys, it's like this and this, but for me, it's like this and this in my brain. Um, where am I? Oh, Hinduism and Buddhism. They spread up like along the Southeast Asia and through in there. It was a big deal when Hinduism and Buddhism came into China and Japan. China specifically, it kind of molded with Confucianism, which we'll talk about when we get to China. We have a whole episode on China because China is really, honestly, an extremely big deal. It's doing this, yada yada yada. It's like everywhere. Religion is everywhere. Lots of spread. It brings all sorts of people together. Um, and it's separate a lot of people. For example, Ottomans and Safavids. They just had this one major religious difference, even though they're both under Islam. They were like, no, we're gonna fight, and then they fought, and the Ottomans are the only ones that came out of that fight. Speaking of people that are not religious, there are agnostic people and atheistic people. Atheistic people are completely like don't care. They're like, I don't believe in God, um, at all. Lots of people get mad about that, like, especially in America. A lot of super religious people will be like, "How can you not believe in God? Like, I'll bring you back to Christ." It's honestly kind of really annoying to look at and watch. Um, a lot of times they'll say, "I believe in what I can see and hear," instead of what people are saying, something I can't actually touch or feel. Um, and then there's agnostic people who believe in God and believe that God existed, but they just don't think he really cares. One important one I heard about once was Thomas Jefferson. He was like, I think God, he was like, God's real, but I don't think God has as much of an impact in our lives as everyone's saying that he does. But I think that's it, right? Right? All right. Later, losers.